Hi, how you doing, and welcome back to another video on the channel. What we have for you today is our weekly transfer video where we take a look at the three most transferred in FPL players and the three most transferred out FPL players, and what we would do if we wanted them, or if we own them, or if we want a wildcard, or using free transfers, and just give our thoughts. So if that does help you, please do subscribe to the channel, like the video. You know, if you are new, subscribing is free and it really does help us grow as a small channel, and it's really appreciated. Thank you to everyone who has supported the channel so far. Hopefully we can continue to grow as the season gets on. Let's take a look at player number one. So the first player we're going to talk about, and it seems that everybody's talking about him, is Cole Palmer, and it's with good reason after his performance in Gameweek 6. With 6 goals and 4 assists so far this season, he's been brought in by 600,000 managers in the last week, in this week, and he's 45.1% owned, up to 10.7 million. What I would just be aware of is that 5 of those goals and 3 of those assists came in 2 game weeks, and that means that he got 1 goal and 1 assist in the remaining 4 game weeks. So obviously he's got huge potential to get massive returns in FPL, but I think you're betting on Chelsea as much as you are on Palmer, and it's how you feel about Chelsea as a team. I also think the fixtures coming up, they're not great, and I know that good form makes bad fixtures easier, but for me, I wouldn't be at a rush to get him in. I think if you wildcard in this game week, absolutely fine to get him in. But I wouldn't be using a free transfer to take Saka out and get Palmer in, because Saka's got Southampton at home and that's a great game. I think even this Nottingham Forest game at home for Palmer, it's not easy. And I think wait a week, see how he does against Nottingham Forest. If you still want him in, he'll still be 10.7, 10.8 million. Get him in at that point. But I wouldn't be using up a free transfer to make what could be a sideways or even a backwards move in the immediate short term. But as a player, for the mid to long term, he's brilliant, and I would not advise against getting him in maybe in a couple of game weeks or whenever the time is right for your team personally. So the next player we're talking about is Bryan Mbeumo, and again, he's someone who a lot of players are getting in. 310,000 managers this game week alone. He got 5 goals in 6 game weeks for Brentford, which is like a mid-table team. That's awesome. You know, at 7.4 million, he's already gone up 0.4 million this season. Brentford's fixtures also make him a fantastic pick, and the fact that he's gone up 0.4 million, I wouldn't let it put you off getting him in. I think a lot of people, they look at the price that he started at and think, oh, I've missed out. I'm going to have to use 0.4 million more than I would have done at the start of the season. You know, I've missed the boat with it. He's not worth getting in. And I would really recommend to not think like that. I think you've got to look at it in the sense that if he was priced at 7.4 million at the start of the season and he was still 7.4 million, would you want him in? And the answer is probably yes, you would want him in. In which case, get him in as long as you can afford him. The only time you need to worry about price rises and price drops is when you physically can't get a player in because of it. Other than that, if you can afford a player, it doesn't really matter whether he's gone up in price or gone down in price. If you think he's going to score points, get him in. And that is someone that I would absolutely say is Bryan Mbeumo. I've got him in my team. I would recommend you to do the same. So the next player is Nicholas Jackson, and a bit like Cole Palmer this, if you're betting on Jackson, you're betting on Chelsea, and it's how well you think Chelsea are going to do in the next few fixtures. People will say, oh, Cole Palmer's better than Nicholas Jackson, and they're right, he is better than Nicholas Jackson as an FPL player at least. And the difference is that Jackson is 3 million cheaper than Cole Palmer. And another reason is that there's less good strikers in FPL than there are midfielder options. So it's whether you value those two things and what you're going to do with 3 million in price difference, because you could do quite a lot with that, you know, especially if you're bolstering your defence or something. There's no point saving money just to save money. You want to get in the best players for your team. So whether you can fit in a few mid-price midfielders and get Jackson, or whether you want to go with the big hitter in someone like Palmer, it's kind of personal choice for you. I do think he's a good option, and I think there's only really Watkins and Haaland who are probably better striking options consistently than Jackson right now. I know you've got Calvert-Lewin, I know you've got Jamie Vardy, but those teams around them are less consistent than Chelsea, Villa and Man City, which is what make Jackson, Watkins and Haaland so much better options. So I would get him in if I was wildcarding. If I was free transferring, I don't think I'd get him in. You know, it depends on your team setup and whether you're getting in Palmer as well. I don't think you need Palmer and Jackson. So obviously Palmer is better. Depends how your team looks, really. But I think Jackson is a good option as well. So the first player we're looking at in the most sold list is João Pedro, and he was on the most transferred in list for weeks at the start of the season. Now he's been sold by 400,000 managers, and I understand why, because he's injured, and we don't know how long he's out for. That combined with Brighton's fixtures coming up, Spurs, Newcastle, Liverpool and Man City in the next 5, that's not good at all. And he's even back down to 5.5 million where he started the season. So I think if you own him still, you've just got to move on, you've just got to cut your losses. Players around the similar price point, the Chris Woods, the Calvert-Lewins, Jamie Vardy's, like we've just talked about, I think they're good options instead of João Pedro as a one free transfer straight swap if you've got a couple of savings in your bank. I think if you haven't and you've got one free transfer, I would maybe try and, I'm not a big fan of taking points hits. So I think if you can last a week and then save another free transfer and then use that money elsewhere, that would be a great option. If you do really want rid of him and you need to take a points hit to do so, I think that's fine. I think you've got to sell either this week or next week just to reinvest the money in the rest of your team. So someone else who is also injured at the moment is Alexander Isak, and he's someone, if you've been watching my videos recently, I actually sold close to the deadline last game week, and I'm still a big believer in Isak and Newcastle, but he's got a broken toe, he was playing Man City, and sometimes you just got to face the music. The writing's on the wall, and you've just got to admit defeat, at least in the short term, and take him out. As soon as Game Week 11 hits, he could be a huge differential in FPL. I think at the start of the season, he was something like 60% owned. He's now 18% owned. By Game Week 11, he could be, 10% owned, depending on how Newcastle do between now and then. And those fixtures that they've got aren't great. I think if you own him, I would recommend selling him. I think there's only Watkins and Haaland who are more expensive. So you could easily do a Isak to Jackson transfer and, cover the Chelsea attack that way. But the good thing about Isak is that price point that he's at, you can get pretty much any striker you want in FPL. So, take your pick and that's your choice. But yeah, if I owned him, I would sell him. Even if it just had one free transfer, I'd probably use it on swapping out Isak or João Pedro if I owned either of them. So the final player we're talking about is Eberechi Eze, someone who I got in my team, I think when he was 7 million, just before he dropped to 6.9, which was fantastic management by me. He's now 6.8 and I still own him. 1 goal so far this season. I actually think Crystal Palace's fixtures are looking pretty good from an attacking point of view. Yeah, Liverpool isn't great this game week, but after that, it's not too bad from an attacking point of view, and they're not going to lose every game this season. If you own him, and me personally, I'm not selling him this game week, but that's because the rest of my team looks quite good, and I think I can cover for Eze for this game week only, and then hopefully he'll come good in the remaining game weeks. I think it's who you're going to sell him for. I know there's some players like Smith Rowe, Rodgers that you could get in for the 5 millions, but again, it depends what your plan is for that money, because we have to remember that a free transfer is worth 4 points, really. That's its kind of value. If you take a hit in your transfers, it's 4 points per transfer. So is it worth spending those 4 imaginary points to take Eze out? I don't think it is. I think he's one of those players that as soon as you take him out, he'll probably score. And the player you'll move to is also inconsistent. I think if you wanted to get someone like Dwight McNeil in, that's a good option if you really wanted to do it. I think I wouldn't be rushing him out of my team. I think if your biggest problem in your team is Eberechi Eze, I think you're having a pretty good time. And I would be really, thinking of rolling a transfer because we've got the international break coming up, and going into the international break with a couple of free transfers is really valuable because there's a lot of injuries that can happen. You get to the next game week and there's a few players coming from across the world on long flights who are probably, going to be benched for that game week, and you just need that flexibility moving forward. So if you owned him, I wouldn't be selling him because he's in my team and I'm 90% not going to sell him. So yeah, let me know what you think about these transfers or any of these players that you are thinking of getting in or selling. Please do check out my latest videos, how my team's done, and the wildcard video should be on the screen right about now. And yeah, any questions, put in the comments, we'll get back to you, and I will see you in the next one.